Welcome to dentReviews. Tonight I want to go and do another IEM shootout. These are sort of in the neutral studio monitor type frequency response, so I guess I'll call this the Neutral IEM Shootout number 2. I have a set of earphones here on loan, and I've been listening to them for a few weeks, maybe even longer than that now, probably a few months. It's been a crazy world lately, lots of things going on. So I've had a lot of time to listen to a lot of these, and I kind of want to just give you guys a comparison. I'd love to do a review on each of them, but I really just am going to do a shootout, kind of give you the comparison, tell you what I think of all of them, and go from there. And I'll give you a lot of details on them, so it'll kind of be like a mini review of each of them in this video. So we're going to start with the Hifi P1 Plus. That would be these bad boys right here. So the Hifi P1 Plus. These are a 10mm planar diaphragm driver. So basically, they call it an ultra nanometer diaphragm. It says it's food grade stainless steel, so I guess you could eat off of these if you wanted to. And it's got a nice 5N OFC copper alloy braided cable. It's got a nice cable. It's got a rotating, sort of like, I believe this is the MMCX connector, I'm not positive. And it braids and then comes down to this nice small split in the cable, which I like a lot. And then it's braided at the bottom as well. And it terminates in a standard straight end 3.5 cable. It's got sort of this carbon fiber texture to it. It feels relatively durable, and even though I'm not a huge fan of the strain relief, it does have a double layer of plastic here, plastic rubber, somewhere in between. It's kind of like a hard rubber, I guess. So it feels like it's relatively durable. And one thing I really do like a lot is the cord cinches on cables, and this has a decent cord cinch. It's on the loose side, but I feel like in use it has held up pretty well. The slight tension from the cable keeps it in place, so it's not problematic at all. And what's nice is that cinch slides down to the center area, kind of forms a single chamber cylinder there, which is kind of nice. The earpieces themselves, interesting shape, not my favorite. They're okay, they're kind of shiny. They are marked with the left and right earpieces, and I do like that the right earpiece has a red ring on the cable itself as well, so that's nice. They have metal filters in the earpieces, and they're just kind of metallic feeling. I mean, you can feel a little bit of heft to them, so they feel like they're pretty durable. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. So what I want to talk about with this particular model, first I'll start with the frequency response. So the Hifi P1 Plus is a very linear bass response. In fact, I think the bass is really good. The treble is decent. It does have a dip around 10 kilohertz, and it has quite a bit of energy very high up, like 15, 16, 17 kilohertz. Now, this isn't meant to be a criticism, but most people can't hear that high up, so they may not notice that. And in fact, this could improve the sound for them if they have hearing loss up there. So if you're someone who doesn't hear a lot up high like that, these might actually be sort of a high boosted earphone that recovers some of that detail for you. For me personally, with pretty good hearing tests, very good hearing tests, I can hear up to that range pretty well, and it sounds too energetic there for me. Now, it's not severe, but there are definitely songs where it stands out a little bit more. I think anyone that's honest would say that even if you can hear up there, most people can't hear up there incredibly well. So having extra energy up there is a little bit less offensive than something in, say, the 2 or 3 kilohertz or even the 6 or 7 kilohertz region. That can be more irritating to a lot of people because it's a lot easier to perceive that boost. So it does have that sort of dip in the 10 kilohertz and the boost up in the 15 or 16, 17 kilohertz. But the biggest issue I have with the response is the sort of lower treble presence from like 1.5 kilohertz to about 6 or 7 kilohertz. Is pretty scooped out. So my opinion, that really brings out a lot of the ambience in a recording and a lot of the hard and firm texture in the treble. So having that scoop out in these makes them sound a little bit soft, which further accentuates that upper treble in a sense that kind of gives it almost a V-shaped sound in the upper region of the response. So it's almost like the treble itself has a V-shape. So it just gives things a little bit softness, a little bit raspiness at times, while still maintaining a relatively neutral balance overall. The bass is extremely linear, the mids are nice and smooth and rich. The bass doesn't have the most sub-bass extension. Well, let me rephrase that. It has extension, it hits very low, but it doesn't have a lot of presence in the sub-bass. So you're not going to hear a lot of that really low sub-bass, like drum and bass hits aren't going to sound satisfying probably for a lot of people. For me personally, they're not bad. I've heard better. They're definitely in the good region in terms of the bass, mid, and treble balance. So I would say overall, the technical performance of these is pretty good. It's not the best I've heard, but it's detailed. It's sort of high resolution sounding. It has a fairly wide sound, not the widest I've heard, but instrument separation is pretty good. Things are very precise, but I think that you lose a little bit of that kind of 3D natural quality to the music because of that treble, especially that 2.5, 3 kilohertz, that dip. That kind of detracts too much for me. So why I like them, they're not very offensive, and they're just a nice overall headphone, earphone, whatever you want to call it. I would say that for the price, which I think these retail about $170, I think for the price, these are actually very, very good. I just think for me personally, I wouldn't buy them because of that lower treble region. That's just a deal breaker for me. If you like a more relaxed lower treble, then you might absolutely love these. They're a very neutral sound with just a more relaxed lower treble. So I'm going to leave it at that and say that those are the 10 Hifi P1 Plus. There's a very good set, but just probably not something I would own myself. I think they are worth the price. The build quality and the cable alone are very nice. So it just depends, like always, I say this a lot, it depends on what your target frequency response is, what kind of sound you like. But in terms of just general performance and quality, they're very good. So if you like that relaxed treble, go for it. The second one I'm going to go over here is the Dunu Titan S. So these bad boys, all right, props go to Dunu. Dunu and Moondrop specifically, those two companies have just churned out so many phenomenal earphones at every price bracket, and a lot of times their inexpensive models are actually as good as some of their more expensive models. So it's not just you have to spend a lot of money to get some good sound. These companies are really offering superb sound for the masses. So this Dunu Titan S, this is a phenomenal earphone. Let me just bring up some information here so I have it on the screen. So the Dunu Titan S, this is a single dynamic driver. If you know me, you know I love dynamic drivers. That's probably my favorite driver type. Second is probably going to be maybe planar. I don't really know. And then third would probably be a hybrid of a dynamic balanced armature and EST. So far from what I've heard, those are kind of the tiers. Dynamic being my favorite. Single dynamic drivers are very cohesive because there's no crossovers, there's no phase issues, usually they're very low distortion. Dynamic drivers tend to be lower distortion than balanced armature. So what you find here in the Dunu is it's a dual chambered housing, and it's got an interesting filter vent here on the outside. I'm assuming that's actually, it has holes in it. I assume that's not just for looks. I assume that's like a bass port. It's an 11 millimeter dynamic driver, so it's fairly large, so it's capable of hitting some pretty good bass without straining the driver at all. The form factor is very nice. I really am a fan of Dunu. I think they do a nice job. These are a little bit more on like the Terminator 2 aesthetic. I like them. They're not my favorite. They're not really blingy, but they're also not really laid back. They're sort of in the middle. They look high tech. They're clean. I like the brushed metal. I have these Moondrop tips on everything. These Moondrop tips are just the best. These are the tips that come with all their new earphones. I don't remember what they're called, but they're awesome. So anyway, it's got a filter here in the end of the nozzle. It's got markings for the left and right. It looks like it has another bass port here. And I'll probably do another video at some point about that. There's different ways to vent the front and back, have different effects on how you vent the bass and what the frequency response will be. So the form factor is good. The cable on these, I don't think these are removable, so I'm not even going to try. I think they're just designed to be non-removable. I could be wrong there. I hope all these IEMs are actually in focus because I have no idea what I'm doing, do I? I hope that hasn't been in focus. Out of focus, I mean. So there's a cord lock here. It's a nice clear translucent cord lock. Looks nice, it's small, and it works really well. It's got a braided cable up to the split. I love the Dunu cable split. Very clean, nice markings. It's got a nice, very nice wound bottom section of the cable. It's kind of light and supple. It's got a very small right angle connector, and the right angle connector has a pretty good build quality with some decent strain relief. Nothing amazing, but it's decent. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Dunu's design and their cable, so this is no exception. Now this one is $80. So what do I think of this bad boy? Well, let me tell you, honestly, for $80, I don't think you're going to get a better Dunu. At about $80, you're probably competing with things like the Moondrop Aria, Starfield, things like that. I think that for the price range, this is probably superior to a lot of those in some ways. It's a little bit cleaner sounding to me than those competitors at the price range. Like, it sounds to me like there's less treble unevenness and distortion. However, they're not perfect. I would say the bass shape of these is a little bit on the arched bass rather than the nice sort of scooped out linear bass that I prefer if you look at my frequency response target that I like. So I feel like these are a little bit, I won't say blooming, but they just aren't the perfect linear bass, but they're very, very good bass. They have an excellent lower treble region, and mid treble superb. The only real flaw that I hear with this is maybe a little tiny bit of unevenness in the treble, but they extend really well. But there's one small peak. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's somewhere in the probably 12 to 14 kilohertz region. And for me, it adds a little bit of a high quality to cymbals and drums and things that are naturally bright. It's not offensive, it's not piercing, but it is enough that it takes away from the smooth, clear, like liquid quality of the treble, which I prefer, and adds a little bit of a rough, like high tonality to it. As a whole, I would say it's a very minor quibble in the overall frequency response, especially at the price. This is a phenomenal earphone. I love the build. I love the styling. The fit is very good for me. I think the cable's nice. And the sound technicalities are very good. All the Dunus I've heard have very good technicalities, and this is no exception. It's not the best I've ever heard in all the regards. Like the soundstage is decent. Like the size of what you're hearing, the room, the replication of what the room sounds like is decent. The width is very good. I don't think it's the best, but again, it's very good. I think the biggest thing they suffer from is just that slight treble imbalance. Takes away from that holographic realism just a little bit, and that bass response takes away from that impeccably tight punchy bass and just leaves you with a very good bass that has decent tightness and decent thumping and whatnot. So is it the best? No, but for $80 I think it's a very hard Dunu to beat. So I'm going to set that aside here. So next we have, let's go with the, I don't know how you say this, but I'm going to say the Letshuoer S12. This bad boy, oh man, let me see if I can get this here. The Letshuoer S12. So this is a very smooth, metallic, matte finish, removable cables. These cables are actually a 4-pin cable. The cable's nice. Is pretty thick and durable. It does have a nice, I love my translucent plastic, nice plastic cord lock. It has a nice centerpiece, and it's very Dunu-like. It's a nice metal, and those two rubber pieces for the stress relief they're okay. I think the cable's thick enough and everything's strong enough that it's probably reasonably durable. It actually, even though it has a cord lock, Mark over at SuperView added these little grommets here, these gaskets, and they work very well. As if you don't have a cord lock already, you could add those on. Anyway, so this bad boy is a planar magnetic driver. So this one, oof, this is good. I like this a lot. This is basically the closest thing to a dynamic driver that I've heard, and I actually have another cable here too that I swapped on here, the 3.5. So I've been using it just standard, just so you know. I'm not using it with the balance, so I don't know if that alters the sound at all. But just using it standard, these things are very, very good. I would say that these are probably really so far in one of my top tier in terms of V-shaped earphones. And I don't want to say that they're aggressive V-shape, but they are a gentle V-shape. The frequency response Has a little bit of extra bass curve. That curve I kind of don't like, but even though it's got a little bit of that bass bloom shape, it counteracts that by balancing it with a little bit more of the upper treble. I think around the 7 to 9 kilohertz region is boosted on these. So what you end up with is you end up with a sort of the impression of a slight V shape. And comparing it to things like the Moondrop Kato and other possibly a little bit more linear, at least in the treble, earphones, I think that this holds up incredibly well. There's a lot of detail pulled out. It gives a little bit more impression of high resolution, of high def quality to it, while sadly at the same time detracting just a little bit of the liquidy smooth mids that I prefer. But for the type of response it is, a very gentle V shape, this is probably the best I've heard in that sort of sound signature. I don't know if I showed you this up close, but the earpieces have a very simple bass port there, metal filters, kind of a simple style to them. So frequency response wise, they're very smooth. I have read reports of people listening to this as well as the 7 hertz timeless 7 hertz, whichever it is. And some people find that 7 kilohertz or so peak a little bit objectionable. I actually don't. In fact, I usually find most earphones are lacking in that area. Very few are actually at what I consider a reference level at 7 to 8 kilohertz. So these are a little bit above reference, but not much for me. So for some people, they might push it too far. For me, it's just a slight boost. That boost, like I said, kind of balances the low bass boost to give that gentle shape. Given that, I think the performance of this headphone is phenomenal. I'm not sure if it's partly the frequency response or partly the driver technology, but these have an excellent detail and resolution. Just the retrieval of details is very fine and very precise. It has a fast and light kind of quality to it, while also having a nice bass. The bass is not the tightest, deepest hitting bass, but overall it has a very nice quality. It reminds me sort of the bass of the HD 600, maybe slightly, although a little bit tighter than that, being an IEM, and with the treble response it gives a little bit more maybe finesse to it. But it's somewhere similar to that. It's kind of a reference bass, but it's not maybe perfectly linear. So I think these are a superb value. These come in, I think these are around, oh my goodness, I don't even remember. I'm just going to guess they're about $180, I think, somewhere around there. For the price, these are absolutely phenomenal. I would say these are a pair that I would be very happy to own. They're very, very high quality. They have decent build quality. They have superb frequency response. There's no objectionable peaks or dips for me personally. Very good extension in the treble. The treble, it goes really high. I mean, I think these go as high as any I've heard, pretty well. Now that peak might be bothersome to some people, so just be aware of that. If you're sensitive in that region, these may not be for you. Otherwise, the lower treble is pretty smooth. Again, not the smoothest. It's not like Moondrop Kato smooth, but it's pretty close. And I think overall these are just a definite winner. The next I want to go over, I guess we're going to go to the KZ CRN Zex Pro. All right, so these are one of those earphones that CRN, I think, teamed up with an earphone company and kind of tuned to be closer to his target. Now, what's really impressive about these, and there's a little bit of controversy that goes along with these, but these are about $35, $40. Now, build-wise, they're actually very, very reminiscent of the NF Audio, if you've ever seen those. They have a very similar sort of faceplate design with the logo, and they're semi-custom. They look like they're molded to an ear, but they're not molded to, specific ear. They just have that general shape. It's got a nice, I don't know if this is plastic or brass, but it's got a gold-colored stem. It almost feels to me like it's plastic, which it very well could be. It looks like it has the metal filter inside. It's got a nice right angle plug, although it does look like it's, I don't know if you call that proprietary, but it's got a sleeve, so you can't just throw any cable in this, which I don't know if these are common types of cables. It's got molded ear guides. It's got a very nice cable. I think these kind of cables are actually really nice. A lot of people probably think these are kind of cheap cables, but it's like a braided cable inside of a cylindrical sheath. It's very thin. The Y split is incredibly small. The bottom is just the two kind of glued together, so you could actually probably pull these apart if you wanted to. I don't like that as much. It would be nice if it was one thicker round cable. I think that's sexy as hell, just the translucent right angle connector. It's just nice and small. Decent stress relief, actually flexes a lot. So while I don't think the cable is incredibly durable just based on the material itself, I feel like this would probably get hard over time. It's that kind of rubber plastic type material that kind of hardens and dries out. It's what it feels like. I don't know for sure though. But the strain relief is decent. The cable is decent. It looks nice. I actually think the looks and the feel of it are good. The cable's not the most supple, but it's not bad either. It's decent. It doesn't have any like super strong memory effect or anything like that. You can wrap this up and, you know, it's not too bad, but it does have a little bit. It's not as supple as something like the Prisma Azul. That cable is phenomenal. So, a little bit about the controversy before I get into the sound. If you look online, people will claim that these are just a single driver, even though KZ basically claims that they're a dynamic driver with a balanced armature mid and an electrostatic high. So a triple driver for $40. That sounds unbelievable, and a lot of people are claiming it is unbelievable because they opened this thing up, and what they found was that two of the drivers aren't doing anything. They're not producing sound, something along these lines. So Critical found out, and he apologized and all this stuff. And you know, it's the company. It's not anything that he had anything to do with, as far as I can tell. So what I thought was really, really bizarre is you can ask Super Review, Mark over at Super Review. I did a blind listening test when I got these. I blindfold myself and I unbox them, and I literally fumble around and connect these while he's on a video chat with me, and I listen to them and I give him my impressions. And when I did impressions of these, I said they sound like they have dynamic bass with balanced armature mids and ESG treble. Literally, I said that, and he will back that up, I'm almost positive. So it literally matches what their site describes as. And just to back that up further, I said the driver types of multiple IEMs that I was blind listening to, and I got them all right. So it's just bizarre. I mean, literally mind-blowing to me when he told me after the fact that, yeah, there's this weird controversy, and he kind of went into it. That just literally blew my mind, because it sounded to me as though that was the case, that it was designed like that, and I could hear the bass had a firm, kind of tight, dynamic driver quality to it. The mids had a sort of smooth and just a balanced armature quality to it, and then the EST, the treble just had that kind of really light and controlled EST quality to it. So everything about it just stood out to me as though it was that. Now, it's very possible it's just the frequency response lended itself to a little bit of those qualities, because the frequency response of this is really phenomenal for the price. The bass is excellent. The bass is almost perfect to my desired target. The lower treble region is a little bit low. That 2 to 3 kilohertz is a little bit low, so it's not as cool and smooth in that region. And then there's a little bit of unevenness on the top end, like ups and downs around 8 to 15 kilohertz, just a little bit. Now again, measurements at that response range aren't even necessarily super accurate, but I can hear a little bit of unevenness in the upper treble. However, they extend really well, and the overall response sounds very cohesive. So I am a proponent of the fact that these are a superb set that is definitely worth the price. These are a very high quality, high value set. Now, if you think that controversy, means that you shouldn't buy these, hey, that's up to you. All I'm going to state is just what I hear and what I see. Quality, sound, to me, these are just almost unreal for the price. These are truly phenomenal. Are they perfect? No. They're a little less wide sounding than I would think they would be with such a good response. They're a little bit maybe soft, and again, I attributed that to the driver technology, but let's just assume they are a single dynamic driver. They're a little bit soft, and I feel like it's not just that lower treble. There's enough of kind of a soft quality that it's got to be something else in there. Maybe it's distortion, maybe it's the whole frequency response as a whole, maybe it's the drivers. I don't know, whatever. But despite that, they're still a very good set. I think that if you're looking for something to get you into a neutral studio monitor type set and you don't have a lot of money to spend, you'd be hard-pressed to get something better than this at $40. There are a few options, like the Sony MH755, if you can score an actual real one off of eBay and then take the time to recable it. You're probably going to spend close to this, if not more, if you're not doing the recable yourself. Those, I would say, are superior to this in some ways, but they're hard to find, and without a recable, they're pretty garbage. They're designed to have a little Bluetooth amp, and they don't have a good cable. So these are probably better as an overall out-of-the-box package. There's also the Moondrop Chew. The Moondrop Chew dominates these in almost every single way, except maybe the bass presence in these is a little bit better, and the treble has a little bit less of a harsh bump in it that the Chew has. It's a hard quality to describe, but I'll get that in the Chew review. So anyway, this is the Zex Pro by CRN, his tuning, and I think it's really just a phenomenal value. So that's what it is. Leave it at that. So the next thing I have here is the, I don't know how you say this, the Auene Jasper, a multi-diaphragm. It's a multi-gradation diaphragm. It says that it has the materials to die for. It's an ultra-linear symmetric magnet system. So it doesn't really say, it just says it's an ultra-low distortion core. So I'm going to take it as these are probably sort of a dynamic driver variant, but honestly, I don't know. They're very shiny, like very chrome style. They're actually fairly weighty metal. They have rotating removable cables here. And the cables are nice. They have a nice, sleek, smooth finish to them. It's got a nice small cord lock. And it's got a nice, decently small Y-split. The bottom of the cable is also a smooth cylinder. And then the right angle connector is very nice looking. It's very compact. The strain relief, again, I say this a lot, but I can tell you that almost every cable I've ever had fails at the point where there's a bend and there's not a lot of strain relief. So I think these are okay, but it wouldn't be the highest in my book. So, but that's kind of the design. It's got your two bass ports here, and this weird metal thing. I don't know if that's just for looks. I think it's probably just for looks. It's like a textured thing there. So that is the build in the style of it. So these come in at about $300. So how do these sound for $300? Well, I personally think there's better competition out there, especially with the Moondrop Chew and the Zex Pro, and especially the S12 I just talked about, the Titan S, all of those earphones. They really make it hard for me to find this a good value. Now, I also feel that these have less fit security than the other earphones that I just mentioned, for me personally. So they're not a huge win in my book in that regard. How is the sound? The sound is good. It has a good balance between bass and treble. They're a little bit on the lighter side. In fact, I actually found like the treble sort of had a quality of like the Moondrop Illumination or something like Etymotic, where the kind of mid treble is boosted and has a cold, kind of cool quality to it. And I like that, but it has a little bit of an uneven upper treble. The very high treble around 15 kilohertz or so is boosted a little bit, has some peakiness. And then the bass has that typical bloomy shape to it, very minimally, but still comes across as a little bit warm. And I think it's also because the kind of mids at the 800 to 1000 hertz kind of area is a little bit recessed, so they almost come across as slightly V-shaped, but without really having the base of the V-shape. So you kind of get like a slightly soft but not super bassy response. I don't want to undersell the bass. It's good, decent quality bass. It's just not phenomenal. I think as a whole, they sound good and there's nothing super objectionable, but I just wasn't super impressed by them. I feel like of all the earphones I just discussed, these left me not really desiring to go back and listen to them anymore. That doesn't mean that they're bad. They do have a decent treble presence to them, and they seem to pull out a lot of detail, but they're just not up to my full, like, overall tonal balance level of quality. So for me personally, I don't find that these are worth the price over something like the other ones that I mentioned. So I'm going to just leave that there. The technicalities are decent. It's funny because, again, I don't know that they're dynamic driver. If they are dynamic driver, I'd say technicality-wise, they sound a little bit more like a balanced armature, in that The treble has kind of a wispy quality, if that's the right word for it, like a lightness to it, which is probably partly the frequency response, but just the technicalities seem a little bit more light and less firm and tactile. So for me, the width of the stereo image is actually pretty good. It's not a lot of depth though for me, and what I mean by depth is like if you were to listen to a recording and you wanted to hear someone walking down at the end of a hallway, it just doesn't come across as natural as if I'm hearing deep down into that hallway like it would with something like the Moondrop Kato or even the Chew. So for these, they just don't give me the believable impression that I'm listening to something natural. So I don't think I would say that these are the best value, but to each his own. If you like that frequency response, a little bit, maybe a little bit mid treble boosted, that might be a good one for you. I don't know. So the last one we have here that I'm going to go over right now is the C Audio Yume Midnight. Now, if you don't know this, I am a huge fan, probably bigger than most people, of the original C Audio Yume. Now, the Yume was, I think, about $180. Don't quote me on that. And I think that overall it has probably one of the best frequency responses out there. And when I say that, I mean overall tonal balance is just really, really good from bass to mids to low. So the Midnight, they took that, I guess you could say, feedback from users, and they boosted the lower bass, and they kind of tamed the mid treble a little bit, and just kind of control things a little bit more in some ways. But for me personally, it shifts the frequency response a little bit too much to the warm quality and not the bright, clear quality that the original had. Now, the original, I would say, even though I think it's just a phenomenal earphone, and when I just forget about other earphones and listen to it dedicated for a while, I start to just truly hear a lot of details and really enjoy it. I love it. I will still say that it does have sort of a soft quality to it, and this is true of all the C audios that I've heard. There's just something about it that I could almost describe it as smushy and soft, except it still pulls out a fine level of detail, and transient attack is good, and the bass is firm, and I mean there's just a lot of good quality to it, but there's just something about it that is not as good as some other earphones I've heard from a technical standpoint. And that might just be because they tried to really finesse that frequency response into that curve. And in doing so, maybe they've pushed the limits of the drivers. I really don't know. So if you wanted a bassier Yume, this is it. If you wanted something as reference as the Yume, I don't think this falls into that category. This is a little bit warmer and a little bit softer sounding than the original. But I would also say maybe it has a little bit less of the mushy quality, but it has more of a frequency response softness. So the treble itself just isn't as forward, and the bass is a little bit lifted, so it just gives itself a more warm quality. Just to show you, they have these carbon fiber style earpieces here. Look pretty nice, nothing amazing, but C Audio X Critical. So again, he has a hand in the tuning there. It's got a meta filter there. It's got a removable cable. I don't know that this is even the original cable, as this is a loaner. I don't have any markings on it or anything, but if it is, it's got a nice Y split, and Mark added a grommet here. So these are decent. I think that for the price, personally, there's much better options out there. If you like that bass response, the treble is very linear and smooth. There's not any really objectionable peaks. Like the Letshuoer S12, or how you say that, and the Timeless, it does have a little bit of extra energy at that 7 to 8 kilohertz, but again, for me, I don't really find it objectionable at all. It's just a slight boost, but you may differ in that, how much you can tolerate. But overall, it has a nice linear and smooth response, just a little bit light in the low treble and a little bit high in the low bass. But the curve and the shape of the bass is good, and the shape of the treble is good, and these extend very, very well. In fact, these are one of the better I think I've ever heard in terms of treble extension. They go really high, and that high quality is smooth and light. It doesn't have any raspy harshness to it. So they do very good if you want treble extension and a little bit of airiness. It's just the airiness has a softer, darker quality to it because of the overall response being tilted towards a warm bass, even though you can hear the air because it extends so well. So it's kind of an interesting balance there. But that is the C Audio Yume Midnight. So forgive my sloppy review, but those are some of the earphones that I wanted to compare. Of those earphones, I think personally, in terms of the order of that I prefer them, I think the Letshuoer S12 would be probably the top. The Dunu Titan S would probably be the second, and then the Zex Pro would probably be the third. After that, probably be the 10 Hifi P1 Plus, the Auene Jasper, and then the Audio Yume. That's probably the rough order. I really think the S12 is a standout there for the value and the quality of the planar driver. Those are just phenomenal set. I kind of wish I had one of those. Those are a nice set. The best comparison I can give you is they're incredibly similar to the Moondrop Kato in overall response and tonal balance, with just a little bit extra of that V shape. So they're going to be a little bit brighter than the Kato and a little bit maybe boomier, if that's the word, just a little bit. And the treble comes off as a little bit more maybe energetic, with a little bit of that Kato mids just missing there. Just a little. So I'd say they're very similar, and A being between them, you'll just hear that it's like a Kato with a slight V shape, and that's great. But I still would say I probably prefer the Kato overall because of the dynamic driver, low distortion, frequency response, linearity, and the fit and the tips. Just the Kato is probably still my all-time favorite earphone, just as a value-driven choice. It's got a great price tag. It's $180, and you're getting a great build quality, durable. The cable's great. The sound is great. Technicalities are superb. Kato has a very high-quality driver. So that is going to be probably my benchmark for a while until something better comes along. But second to that, that S12 is very close. The Titan S is decent. I think that higher treble is a little less refined than those two, but overall, the sound in general is pretty close, step behind. And then the Zex Pro is probably the next step back in terms of frequency response and pretty close in that whole running, but just the technicality suffer a little bit. And then the others are just all below that. So that's going to be the summary. Thank you guys for hanging in here and putting up with this entire review. Forgive my sloppiness, but if you like the review, please subscribe. If you guys have any questions at all, let me know. I'm going to try to get back into doing a little bit better camera work with my videos, but life has been a big B, and it's gotten in the way, so time is of the essence. So thank you guys again for watching. I really do appreciate it, and you guys have a great night.